Welcome to the Wisdom for Life podcast with David Baker. David was a former paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne Division and for over 30 years has been a preacher. He has written 5 books and is an Amazon #1 best-selling author. He is the chaplain at the county jail, pastors a church, and is the father of 11 children. Yes, 11. This podcast is here to give you wisdom for your family, your marriage, your children, your finances, your health, and your life. And now, the host of Wisdom of Life podcast, David Baker.
Hello and welcome. It is Monday, October 15th, and we have something special for you. We're going to 5 days a week on our podcast, and each day will be something a little bit different. Monday will be for children, and we're going to jump right in. Don't have a big introduction planned, just want to jump in and give you the principles that you need this week to teach your children. I have a book, it's titled How to Raise Rich Kids, and in this book it has 52 topics, 52 things that Solomon taught his son, the richest and wisest man in the world. We're going to go through each week, each one of those topics. I'm not going to read it from the book. I'm going to teach the lessons like I have dozens of times to our church and to our families and even to our children, and to give you the gist of that. And so what I want you to do is to be able to take this on Monday and then take these verses and each day teach the principle through one of these verses to them. Now, the Bible says you can teach when you're walking by the way, when you're lying down, when you're rising up, meaning we're supposed to teach all the time. If you have a set time, you can bring all the kids in the morning or evening and do devotions, that's fine. If your lives are crazy and busy and you're driving kids to practice in school and work and whatever, you can talk to them about this topic on the way or over dinner or whatever. But make sure you get these principles across to your children. So I don't plan on having a big introduction. I just want to jump in. Hey, Monday morning, pop in, get this, write the verses down, and teach this to your children. If you want the book, of course, you can get it. It's at fixfamilies.com, fixfamilies.com, or you can get it on Amazon. You can get an ebook copy on Amazon, whatever you want to do. But it's so important to be able to teach our children and teach them the right things. A lot of times we do not know what to teach our children. You take the richest and wisest man in the world, teach the things that he taught, it would be good. Now, as you know, I talk too fast, but you can listen to these again. The first lesson is longer, I'll be honest with you, because there's just so many neat things about listening. So the first lesson is to obey and listen to your parents. And this is so important, because if your kids don't get this, all the other lessons you teach aren't going to matter, okay? So your children have to listen to you. There's an old commercial when I was a kid, when E.F. Hutton talks and the whole room got quiet. People listen. That's the way it ought to be when you talk as a parent. How many times do kids, I didn't hear you, I didn't understand that, I didn't know you didn't say that. We've got to get their attention. So many times the children are like the Peanuts comics where the adults are talking as wah, 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 and they don't get it. It shouldn't be that way, okay? And so I'm going to give you 7 principles, 7 verses that Solomon taught his son about hearing and listening and obeying, and then I'm going to give you some practical things to be able to help on this lesson. Now, again, all of them won't be this long, but this is very, very important. All right, day 1, Proverbs 1:8. My son, hear the instruction of thy father and forsake not the law of thy mother. The first thing we need to make sure our children do is to hear the instruction of the father. Sometimes it seems like children are deaf when dad speaks. They must hear. If you have to, get your children a hearing test so you know they don't have a problem, and make sure they hear you, okay? We'll talk about some practical things in a minute, but that's the verse. Make sure, hear the instruction of thy father and forsake not the law of thy mother. Second day, Proverbs 2 verse 1. My son, if thou wilt receive my words and hide my commandments with thee. Number 2, after they hear it, they need to receive it. Hearing is not enough. We must accept it into our life as our own. That is what receiving is. Why do so many children obey while they're home, but as soon as they leave the home, they go off and mess their life up? It's because they never receive the words into their heart, okay? So first we need to make sure they're hearing, then we need to make sure they're receiving it, they're accepting it. Number 3. Proverbs 3 verse 1, my son, forget not my law, but let thine heart keep my commandments. After they have heard and received, Then we need to make sure they don't forget what they were taught. This can be done by repetition and by good teaching methods. Also, it is remembered if the child wants to remember it. It's amazing how a child can remember their toys or games but forget their chores. We need to give them the desire that they want to listen and hear and receive. Okay? So when you're teaching these, you give them the verse, pick a memory verse for the week, one of these 7 verses, and then teach and talk about this to them. Talk about, hey son, you got to make sure you hear me. Okay? God says you need to hear the instruction of thy father. Son, when I say something, you need to stop what you're doing. You need to look at me and you need to hear. Teach and talk about that. The second day, son, not just hearing, you need to receive it. You need to accept it into your heart. You need to receive it from me. If I'm handing it out to give it to you and you don't receive it, it's not the same. And third, son, you don't need to forget it. You need to keep it in your mind. You need to remember, oh, Dad, I forgot. Dad, I forgot. That's not an excuse not to obey. And then, day 4, Proverbs 4, verse 10. Hear, O my son, and receive my sayings, and the years of thy life shall be many. So in day 3, we mentioned we needed to give them a desire to want to hear and receive the words. Here's Solomon telling his son, if he receives Dad's sayings, he will live a long time. Solomon is telling his son there's a reward for listening to Dad. We should teach them this principle and reward them for listening. And so teach them, son, there's a reward for listening. Okay, you may think I'm old. You may think I don't know what I'm talking about. Son, I've been where you're at. When you hear and you receive and you listen, you'll be blessed and rewarded for that. Day 5, Proverbs 4, verse 20. My son, attend to my words. Incline thine ear to my sayings. Here Solomon is telling his son to attend to his words. Attend is like an attendant, just waiting to hear the instruction to obey. This is how children should be with their parents. Solomon also tells his son to incline his ear to his sayings. We should teach our children literally to lean toward us when we're speaking because they want to hear what we're saying. When we eat our Sunday afternoon Sunday afternoon meal, girls would put on their aprons, get their pen and paper, take orders like we would take a drink. We're having guests over. The same way we should attend to the words of our parents. It would be good to help children as soon as possible to get a planner system, a written to-do page from their parents' words to help them. This will help them not to forget and will help them to be organized. Got my kids a little bitty spiral 3x5 thing and say, I forgot. Okay, here it is. Get your notepad, write it down, organize your day, plan what you need to do, listen, hear, receive, don't forget, write it down. Okay? Very, very, very important things. You get a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old to be able to do that. What you're going to do to help them to be organized, disciplined, and schedule the rest of their life will be amazing. Day 6, Proverbs 5, verse 1. My son, attend to my wisdom and bow thine ear to my understanding. Once we have our children hearing, receiving, attending to our words, not forgetting it, then we need to help them to attend to our wisdom and understanding. Sometimes children will do exactly what they're told, but that's all. Sometimes that's not what we really mean. There's some children's books we have called Amelia Bedelia. She's the ultimate literalist. Anything that is said, she takes literally. For instance, when she is told to dust the living room, she took dusting powder and sprinkled it all over the living room. They're hilarious books, literally just an ultimate literalist. And so that's what she heard, go dust the living room, so she put dust around the living room. We should teach our children to listen to the words, but also to know our wisdom and understanding so they can know what we mean and not just the words. When this happens, we're transferring truth. Understanding says, okay, I see it like you see it. I understand. I see what you see. That's what we want. It's totally different. Our kids could obey but not receive it. Our kids could receive it but not understand it. Okay? The understanding means, okay, I see it. Okay, I got it. Okay, that makes sense. And you want that to click in their heart. Then day 7, Proverbs 7, verse 1. My son, keep my words and lay up my commandments with thee. We need to teach our children not just to hear, receive, attend, don't forget them, but to keep them. Children should be taught they need to hold and preserve the words their parents speak as important. David told God in Psalm 119, 168, I have kept thy precepts and thy testimonies. This should be the testimony of our children for our words, to keep them, a son, to keep them, to have them with you, to hold them with you. The Bible talks about to keep them like around thy neck. to write them on the table of thy hearts, to keep them, and that's what you want. Okay? So those are 7 days, 7 verses. Again, very quick. In devotions with your children, if you have time to sit down and sing a song, do prayer requests, we've taught and can teach if you need it on how we do family devotions. But to get these truths across, however you need to, whether it's over breakfast or dinner, whether it is while you're driving them to school or picking them up from work or taking them to ball practice, whatever, to make sure you're talking about these. Have these principles to be able to teach your child, and they will build on each other. Okay? Now, again, this one I said it's going to be longer because I want to give you some practical things to be able to help you with your children and listening. Okay? So, practical. Number 1, get their attention first. Get their attention. Hey, son, okay? Get their attention first. Number 2, have them stop what they're doing. Have them stop what they're doing. Next, use their name when talking to them. Most of our parents, when they use our name, we understand David Mark Baker, full name, middle name, last name, okay? We better listen. Solomon does this when he says, my son. He's using the affectionate term of son to get his attention, okay? Very, very important. Make sure you have their attention. Next, make sure you have eye contact. Make sure your child is looking you in the eye. The eye is a gate to the soul. You can tell a lot about someone when you look in their eye. If they're still playing, still doing what they're doing, I'm listening, son, look at me. Look in my eyes, okay? Our kids have heard that 100 times. One of our boys, he was little, he's still in a high chair. He's talking to mom, and she's working, she's doing something, and he doesn't think she's paying much attention to him. So he says, Mommy, look in my eyes. And he had to understand, son, you don't get to tell mommy that. We tell you that. But he had heard that enough. Look in my eyes. We want to make sure that we're getting through to them. Eye contact. Number 5, have them repeat back to you what you said. This way they cannot say, Dad, I didn't hear you. In doing this, you're making sure they heard it, understood what you wanted them to do. Okay, repeat. I heard you. Okay, repeat back to me what I said. Many times they can't. Could you say it again? Yeah, that's what I thought. You weren't listening. If they can repeat it back to you, they heard it, you understand, they understand, we're on the same level. That is such a big deal to be able to do. Number 6, speak very softly, slowly, but distinctively when you tell them what to do. So they have to stop what they're doing and pay close attention to hear. Make sure they heard you. But there should never be a need to yell or scream to make them hear and obey. When you have to do that, you're not in control. Okay? There is no need to do that. I'm not going to illustrate the screaming part of it, but imagine someone screaming and losing it. The kid's going, all right, mom's lost it again. Dad's lost it again. And some kids enjoy that, okay? Compare that to, son, look at me. Son, look in my eyes. Listen very carefully. This is what you better do. Do you understand me? Do you have any questions? Repeat back to me what I just said. All right, I will be inspecting what I told you to do. Okay, that's serious. That's big. Look at my eyes. Okay, slow, distinct, powerful. Uh-oh, he means what he says. He speaketh as one that hath authority. Okay, that's what you want to do and have with your children. No need to yell at all for that. Number 7, watch for any attitudes they are giving when you tell them to do something. Don't allow them to get an attitude without putting it in check. They can't really hear when you have an attitude, when they have an attitude. So you told them to do something, fine. Oh, excuse me. I didn't like that tone. I didn't like that fine. Look at me. We don't handle it that way. I told you to do something. You say, yes, sir, and you smile and you go do it. No attitudes. They might be able to listen, but hearing is a different story, okay? Make sure they don't have an attitude when they're doing that. Let's start over. Or son, if you need, we can give you an attitude adjustment before we do this. Are you okay? I'm okay. They know what an attitude adjustment is. Kids have a spot on them that adjusts their attitude, okay? And we talked about that. All right, so number 8, give them, these are just the practical points here, give them things to see if they'll listen and then check up on them, okay? One of my kids, their job is to fill the refrigerator with drinks. And so I tell them to do it. Sometimes they forget. Follow up. Check up on them, okay? I told my son, son, did you put the drinks in the refrigerator? And he said, yes, sir. I said, you did? He goes, yes, sir. He said, when? He said, right after church. You told me Saturday night and I forgot. And Sunday, while church going on, I remembered. So I wrote it on my hand. And as soon as I got home from church, I went to do it, okay? Because he knows it's not just excuse, oh, I forgot, okay? Number 9, very interesting and fun. Listen to this. Number 9, play listening and obeying games. Play listening and obeying games. Games like Jesus said, or Mommy and Daddy said. Who's Simon? Why should we be listening to Simon anyway? Simon says, okay? But Jesus said, Mommy and Daddy said, take the simple game that kids play and give it a meaning, okay? And so play Simon says, but play it with Mommy said, Daddy said. Number 2, games where each child has to do, has one thing to do, and when they do it, then give them 2 things to do. And they have to remember both of those. Then they get 3 things to do and have to remember that. Simple things like, okay, go pick up the book, turn the light on, turn the light off, close the door. The game progresses until someone forgets to do one of the tasks. Amazing how many times you could tell somebody 2 or 3 things to do. Oh, I forgot. What did you say? But other people can get it in their mind first, second, third, and can do that. What a great tool. What a great training thing that you can tell your child 5 things to do, and they can do 5 of those in a row. And by the way, make it fun. Give them a little reward for it afterwards, okay? Next, add a twist to these games. Just whisper the orders and get quieter and quieter until the last one can hear you. This will give your children to pay attention without you having to yell at them, okay? Get real quiet to be able to do that. When we play a game, when we're teaching our kids to be a number 1 worker, we'll have a room set up. All right, go into this room. There are 3 things that are out of order. You have to find them, okay? There's a piece of lint on the floor. This book is open. It's supposed to be closed. This blind is halfway up and it's supposed to be down. They have to walk in and look for what needs to be done. All right, there's 4 things in this room that are not right. Those games are teaching and training games, listening, obeying, seeing what needs to be done. Great ways to be able to teach, to make it fun for them and not just hard, okay? All right, next practical thing. Always remember that partial obedience is disobedient. Make sure your child understands this and do not let them get anything over on you when they did this thing good but left the other undone. Life demands we obey fully and not just one thing to pacify others. God told King Saul to kill all the animals and every person of the Amalekites. He thought he obeyed God. He only partially obeyed. God rejected him from being king. Okay? Partial obedience is disobedience. Next, make sure you start early and expect them to obey. Mrs. Wesley, the mother of John and Charles Wesley, founders of the Methodist Church, thought she had failed if her children were not obeying by the time they were 18 months old. Okay? 18 months old. It's a big deal. Train up a child in the way he should go. A child. Next, tell them good reasons why they should obey that will help them. Solomon did that often. If we're not careful, our children will think that that they are here only to obey and help us instead of how it's going to help them. God tells us good will come when they obey. Hear, O my son, receive my sayings, and the years of thy life shall be many. Then he says, my son, if thou wilt receive my words and hide my commandments, then thou shalt understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. Then it says, my son, forget not my law, but let thy heart keep my commandments. For length of days, long life, and peace shall they add unto thee. So let them know that obeying you and doing right will give them rewards. Next, make sure you obey and listen to your Father's words. We reap what we sow. If we don't listen to the words of our Heavenly Father, why should God help us with our children to listen to our words? Next, reward them when they listen well and discipline them when they don't. If they always say, Dad, I didn't hear you, and you know they really did and they're just playing dumb to get out of trouble, it's definitely time to discipline. Next, when we teach our children to obey immediately, if our children obey when they feel like it, then that's not obedience. My children sing a song, it's by Patch the Pirate, and it says, I will obey the first time I'm told. I will obey right away. Never asking why, never with a sigh. I will obey right away. It's a great character-building song, and they understand how they are to obey. There's a story told of a missionary and his dad, they were in the jungle. One day the dad said to the son in a quick, strong voice, drop to the ground. Boy immediately dropped to the ground. A dad told the son, crawl over here very slowly. A son crawled over to the dad. After the son was by the dad showed him why he had to drop and crawl to him. There was a giant boa constrictor lowering itself down toward the son. If the boy had questioned his dad and asked why, instead of obeying immediately, he would have become prey to the snake. I have no problem explaining to my kids why. I want them to know why, but I don't want them to have to know why before they obey. I want them to obey first. Then after, son, let me explain. God says we rear our children in the nurture and admonition, okay, discipline and teaching. I love teaching, but I want to make sure they obey first, and not just obey if they agree or if they understand or if they see it. You may not see it, but you're going to obey first. I'm glad to explain to you why afterwards. In the military, we were taught over and over to obey immediately without asking questions. We didn't even understand everything then, but in combat situations, you need to obey immediately without asking questions because your life depends on it. The life and future of your children depend on them being able to obey quickly with no questions asked, okay? Number 16, and we're done with this. Here we go. When we tell our children to do something, try to make sure there's a purpose to it. They don't have to understand what the purpose is right now, but at least make sure you understand why you're having them do what you told them to do. Children should obey immediately, even if they don't understand or know of why, but there should be a why. There's an ancient story of a sentry standing day after day at his post with no apparent reason for being there. One day, a passerby asked him why he was standing in this particular place. I don't know, the sentry replied. I'm just following orders. The passerby went to the captain of the guard and asked him why the sentry was posted in that place. I don't know, the captain replied. We're just following orders. That prompted the captain of the guard to go to pose the question to a higher authority. Why do we post a sentry at this particular spot? He asked the king. The king didn't know. He summoned his wise men and asked them the question. The answer came back that 100 years before, Catherine the Great had planted a rose bush and had ordered a sentry placed there to protect it. The rose bush had been dead for 80 years, but the sentry still stood guard, okay? Make sure there's a purpose, understanding of why. They may not understand it, but you understand there's a reason why you're having them do this. If there is no reason why, it can be very frustrating to them, and I want them to understand, not just to obey. Okay, so that's the first one of these. If you have questions about it, let me know. We do a training video if you need it. I'll be glad to send it to you on how we do family devotions, and it's a video of our family devotions teaching and going through it. But the big thing is to make sure that they get these principles, and you can give it to them when they're getting up in the morning, when they're walking by the way, when they're lying down. You can teach it to them anytime. Make sure they understand, son, you got to hear. You got to listen. You got to receive it. You got to attend to it. You have to remember it. You have to keep it. All these things to be able to help them. Imagine if our children did all those things with our words. How much better off their life would be and family would be. Okay? All right. God bless you. Every Monday we'll be doing this. Okay? So pop in here on Monday and be ready to get some teaching and training lessons for the day. And it's just biblical. Okay? What the richest and wisest man in the world taught his son. Number one, when E.F. Hutton talks. Number one, when mom and dad talk, the kids better listen. God bless you. Talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Wisdom for Life podcast. If you have any questions for us, email us at askpastorbaker@gmail.com, and we will answer them in an upcoming podcast. The email is askpastorbaker@gmail.com.